G'day everybody, it's Dave from Wing Chun Mind Force. Once again, I've got the great honour of having Sifu Kevin Earle from New Zealand on, and he's kindly come back to talk to me about some things we didn't cover in the previous videos. Good to see you again, Kev.
Yes, good to see you, David.
Is it okay to call you Kev? It's sort of an Aussie thing to call Kevin's Kev, but I know that
that's all right. Not a problem.
Some people don't like it.
A lot worse.
I always try to call people whatever they like to be called, but I'll just share the screen. There's this terrific poem that you sent me, and I'll just bring it up. Where is it? There. Okay, so can you see that okay?
Yep, I can. Yep.
Yeah. So you sent me this a while ago and you had it on. Did you have it on your website or your Facebook?
It's on my website and it's in my book and it's on on Facebook. I've shared it on Facebook, David.
Could you just tell us about it?
Well, it's just a verse that floated into my head one day, a bit like water. But that's the way I wanted to express the way that I see Wing Chun. Iron draped in coats of silk, of course, refers to the fact that it's a very powerful and brutal art. And on the inside, but on the outside, well, on the inside, of course, we can start talking about. Oh, sorry, I'll look up here. Internal, the internal aspects of Wing Chun, and then people talk about the external or the brutal aspects of it, and it seems to get separated, but really we're one. So we're not external, we're not internal. I see a lot of people today going on about how their Wing Chun is internal or they practice internal Wing Chun. And I don't see it as two separate arts or entities.
It's more of a Taoist, like a yin and yang, isn't it? Like
yes,
two as one, always interchanging.
Yes, it interchanges. It's and we can use it for brutal things. We can destroy an opponent if that needs be, or we can control. So it's sort of, if one likes to use that hard and soft idea, that's sort of what I was trying to express and get out of my own mind and explain how I see the art. It's an invincible art, like water, and it's deceptive like water. So it's life-giving, and yet it destroys life. So water is very powerful. Some people just think of water as. By the way, I liked your video the other day about water and the leaf on the water. That was brilliant, and that sort of encapsulates what I was really meaning here too, David.
Yeah, great. I'm glad you liked it, because I wouldn't take the liberty of calling myself a poet, but I do have a bit of a gift for the poetry, I believe, and you certainly do. This is an excellent poem because it's really a word picture. It conjures the intangible. It sort of conjures up images that you take a lot of words to try and explain, but just they're sort of visual images to me. Boom, boom. Subtlety of control, softer than snow. I love that. It's very hard to put into words the feeling of Wing Chun when it's done properly, the feeling of it. I personally often feel as if I'm on the edge of a razor, and I can't exactly explain what that means. It's just like I'm sort of between two worlds, between two minds, the conscious and the subconscious, or the superconscious, as you like to say, which I like. But yeah, poetry and art are a big thing, and I sort of wanted to lead on to. I'll just come back to you. Yeah, I wanted to come back to just the idea that the old masters of Kung Fu from the legends often were these eccentric warrior poets living up in the mountains, you know, Taoist philosophers, painting, doing Kung Fu, meditating on nature. I know a lot about art, and I know that my readings of Chinese traditional art in that sort of Taoist sense is all about sort of becoming one with nature, even though it's a cliche, but, you know, just being amongst nature constantly and really not painting until the painting sort of comes as the essence of whatever it is that's inspiring you, rather than the more think it out approach. And as an artist, I've always, even though I've been sort of thoroughly trained in a conscious way to think about angles and lines and shapes and anatomy and light and all sorts of stuff, but that doesn't really float my boat. I don't like planning a painting. I'm much more into sort of a poetic painting that just comes, and it feels like it's coming from that superconscious. And I see that in your poem. Now, just what do you think about the effect of Wing Chun training over years on somebody, as far as, you know, becoming an expressive artist, or, you know, writer, poet? Have you struck that with other people, or how's that work in your life?
Oh, wow, that's a pretty deep question, really. But I think for my understanding, as I say, as I've dealt with other people over the years, is, you know, people just take it so many different ways, David, but I find a bit of a common theme starts to develop with the or common goals start to develop with people who spend a long time at it. You know, the destructive fighting aspect of it seems to leave, and they, I guess, mature in the art and become a little more mellow and forgiving. And I recall, for example, one student who came to me he wanted to take revenge on something very personal in his life that had happened. And so I just started him on the form, and I had a couple of conversations with him, and I met his family and that, and he was really on a very destructive path. And I just encouraged him to keep training the form. And after about a year, it slowly dissipated, you know, and it did sort of live within him for a long time, and probably still does today. But the thoughts of vengeance or that revenge and that sort of thing disappeared slowly. And that's the sort of change that I like to see in people who start training. I've probably gone off topic a little bit, but that's the sort of change I like to see in people, is that it changes their entire outlook on life and the way they live their life. I mean, I know what a destructive person I can be, and I'd have been much worse without Wing Chun, you know. And I enjoy, over the years, I've been criticized somewhat for just training anybody. I'll train anybody that turned up.
Yeah.
People would say, oh, why are you training that person? He's a gang member, or why are you training that person? He's this or that, or why do you train those people over there? And, you know, they would quote martial arts schools that, you know, have all these wonderful students who are so disciplined and great members of society. And I said, yeah, but who have they changed?
Mm-hmm.
They haven't changed anybody. They started with good students. They would only teach good students and good citizens and whatever. So and that's all they've got.
That's
if I can take someone who's an outlaw of some, by some people's description, a criminal by some people's description, and I can change their entire mindset and the way they live their life and the way they live with other people, then that's an accomplishment. But it's their accomplishment. All I've done is point them on a path, you know.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a joy when I see someone change their life, you know. I believe that's what the training in the martial arts is about, or the big thing that it's about for me.
Yeah, that's marvelous. That's really, I was just thinking as we're talking, this is one of the areas that you don't hear much about in modern martial arts, because it's so focused on the MMA, UFC, just knuckling it out on the street or in the ring or whatever. But that the way we sort of grew up in Kung Fu from the 70s, we really got a big dose of that Eastern spirituality input as well. You know, I'd say you'd be the same as me, but I was very attracted not only to the fighting ability of Bruce Lee, but the wisdom of Master Po in the Chinese temple teaching little Kwai Chang Caine, and that sort of mystical Kung Fu thing has always appealed. And that was a terrific story you just told, because that's one of the best stories I've heard, because people don't think about that. They just think, oh, I'm going to teach somebody to fight well, but you've taught them to be a better person and to be, you know, a true Kung Fu person, which is not somebody who goes around looking for a fight, not keen to jump into it, you know, get on the street and prove that you're the cock of the roost sort of thing, you know. But yeah. So
I like to see change in people, you know.
Yeah, no,
that see people grow, you know.
And art changes people. I've always had a pretty bad temper, which I've kept on a short leash, you know, because things just aggravate me, and I tend to be, I've just got an aggressive temper. I'm sort of a fighter, but Wing Chun really settled me down a lot. And I remember having a bit of an epiphany one day, and I thought, you know, something pings me off, and I'm like, grrr. And I thought, well, Dave, that's actually like the opposite of what Wing Chun's teaching you. You're tensing up and you're fighting back and you're using brute force, and, you know, you're sort of, how about just Fong Sung, you know, just take it in and let it go past you. And I'm still trying to learn how to do that. It sort of had an effect on me. I'm not quite as aggressive as I used to be, and I don't think it's just getting old. I think it's just the wisdom of Wing Chun starting to change me.
Yeah, there's more than one way to win a battle.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I had this massive Islander. I think he was an Islander, but it was in Cairns. This guy was about 6'6", and he was built like a brick, you know what? And he just sort of bumped into me in this really crowded nightclub, and he's looming over me, and he looks down and he says, "What sort of C word are you?" And I look up at him and I said, "Actually, mate, I'm a good bloke. You should get to know me." And just look at him and goes, "Huh," and then just walks off. It's like, so like, oh yeah, good answer, you know.
Yes, I see one of your followers, Dave, commented on one of the videos, and he said that he'd like some more stories about the history of Kung Fu and the history in New Zealand, and that perhaps I'd have some pretty interesting combat stories.
Yeah.
I think that was the Horse 7.
Yes. Yeah, he's a good
now,
guy. I often wonder what to call people. Do I call them D Horse 7? Some people I know their names, others I just know them by their moniker.
Right. Well, I think I'll leave the interesting combat stories for more personal discussions, or I'm actually writing about a few of them, believe it or not. But
yeah,
so you can wait for my book.
Well, that's it. I want to promote your
combat.
YouTube and your Facebook so as people can. You got such a plethora of great stuff. Your YouTube channel's cool. I love all the retro sort of stuff as well as the recent stuff. And I was looking at that fellow with yellow hair from 2000. I'm thinking, that can't be Kev. And I'm looking at him. Is it your son?
Could be my son. Yeah.
Yeah, Earle. His name's Earle.
Yeah, that's probably Clay.
Yeah,
He's my oldest son.
Right. He looked a bit like you, but I thought, oh no, he couldn't. Kev wouldn't be that young back in 2000. He just sort of looked like a young fella.
I only wish. But he's a excellent Wing Chun practitioner in his own right. So the thing about combat stories is people think you're boasting and you're sort of glorifying combat or something, and then of course they go off and watch a good mass murdering kung fu movie, I think that's okay, but no one else can have real stories. But
I often say to my kids, they play all these games where they're shooting people all the time. Come on, Dad, come and shoot lots of people with us. And I'm going, I've been a bit too close to the reality of it. It doesn't turn me on just shooting people randomly. It's not trivial to me. I've never shot somebody. I've pointed a gun at somebody and been prepared to shoot, and that was close enough. I don't. It's okay for kids, like we used to run around playing cowboys and Indians or whatever, John Wayne. It's okay for children's fantasies, but when you're a grown up, you realise it's not all that cool shooting people, Well,
I will be telling some of those stories, but not today. But the other part of his question, I'd just like to recap quickly a couple of things about the history of kung fu, because especially when you were talking about Damo or Damo back in the day and all that sort of thing, is that sometimes we, especially a lot of the younger modern students, forget where we came from or where they came from. There was someone came before, they're the Bruce Lee of today, but someone came before them. Someone made a track through that jungle which they're following, and I think last time I talked about, or maybe in the first video, I talked a little bit about the early societies, kung fu or Chinese societies in New Zealand, and I looked a couple of them up. In fact, I've got a very good book here. I'll just hold it here so you can see it. This is a recent publication, and it's a family history of the Sioux Hoys in New Zealand. And it's a marvelous book of early Chinese merchants and settlements in New Zealand.
Wow!
Of course, having come over for the gold mining, and I was looking there, and I see that they had what they called the Faithful Trustworthy Society, which was a Tong society, which was officially formed in 1869, and within a few years they formed there were some 15 provincial, we'll say, Chinese societies in New Zealand. And so, you know, they were quite prevalent, and to assume that there was no kung fu or that practice would be a bit naive. And it talks about, and of course they weren't, if you watch the Warrior program on Netflix, you know, they weren't all fighting each other all the time. They didn't come here to fight. They came here to earn a living. And the merchants that formed the Tongs were charitable, almost in a way, organisations. They weren't triad criminal organisations as such. They were associations which welcomed the new miners that were arriving into the country. They were somewhere for board and lodgings, and then they'd go out to go out mining. And then there were those that wanted to return to China, often with no money, had to settle their debts before they left, and they'd be helped out by the societies. And you know, and then when a Chinese miner died, and his body would need to be sent back to his relatives in China, and they would fund that, or oversee that, and see that.
Is that all in that book? Is that all in that book?
Yes, I write a little bit about that sort of thing, more about the actual merchant accomplishments and the role that the Chinese played in settling places like Dunedin and other places around the South Island mainly. But I noticed that in Australia, you had what was called the Four Counties Association and the Nam Pon Soon Society. I think the Four Counties Association was one of the bigger ones. So you would have had a number of associations in Australia back in the time of the gold mining in Australia. And so it could be worthwhile people doing a little bit of research and finding of the families that settled in Australia, and probably find that there was martial arts, you know, kung fu being practiced within those families right up till the present day. You know,
you've reminded me of this wonderful Chinese museum in Melbourne I went to, that had the best sort of overview of Chinese culture in Australia and the early settlers, and they'd undoubtedly have information. There was a really cool old guy. He actually thought I was a little bit Chinese. He was saying to me, "Are you part Chinese? You look a bit like a northern Chinese." And I was quite stoked about that, but I've discovered I'm just a Scotsman, and that's it. But I was quite thrilled about that. He thought I looked a bit Chinese, but they had an incredible collection of, you know, traditional costumes, and because that was the epicenter of the gold rush was in Victoria, and my wife comes from Bendigo, and they've got which is a big gold mining place, and they've got still a strong Chinese community. They've got a Joss house is what I know it as, like a temple. I think it's still operating, and they've got the oldest imperial dragon outside of China that comes out every year. It's called something Lung. Can't remember now, but the day before they let off thousands of the biggest, like, threepenny bungers all strung out on these frames, completely deafening, and then the dragon comes out, and they do this dragon dance procession through the streets of Bendigo. And yeah, I'd forgotten about that, actually. I've got some booklets I got, you know, when I first met Lizzie 20-something years ago, but you got me thinking now. I'm going to have to approach those guys and ask them a bit about it, see if they got any history of Kung Fu in Australia.
Yes, I'm sure there'd be some somewhere, and there's possibly even been books written by similar to this one that I just I just put up that have been written by and about Chinese families in Australia.
Yeah.
And it doesn't all have to be kung fu. It just gives you an insight into the early culture and the part they played, and the Chinese played, and establishing the country as a whole.
My little town here, Murwillumbah, it's a real hick town, beautiful place, but there used to be a strong Chinese community. You don't see many of the older Chinese around anymore, but I remember the first time I came here in the 70s, there was he really was just pure Chinese looking little grocer, real happy guy, great guy, and he had the broadest Aussie accent, and he was the first Chinese ocker that I'd ever met. I've met many since, but he's a real Aussie, but he looks like he's straight out of China. And I discovered his family were one of the pioneering Chinese families here. And
right.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So you're writing a book about this sort of subject, are you?
Partly, I'm writing a book which is more my own history and some of the experiences I've had, and how it ties into the training. Because I've been training since over 50 years now, so I've got a lot to tell, and hopefully a lot of those experiences will tie into the training, and that training, those ideas might be beneficial to someone.
Well, I'll certainly promote the heck out of it when you get it published. I'll let everyone know.
Yeah, no, thanks, David.
We need to hear the voices.
Yeah. Going back to where I started about the associations and that. Actually, the oldest association in America that I know about, which was formed in 1922 in Hawaii, and that's the oldest Chinese Kung Fu association.
Okay.
And that was one of the Chinwu or Jinwu association that was formed there.
And that's that group that in Fist of Fury. That's a Jinwu Kwun school that Bruce is part of, and his master's poisoned by the dreadful Japanese, and he goes and gets his revenge.
Yes. Yeah, I think the modern Jinwu Association started in the early 1900s, I think. They formed a new or a modern association.
All right.
Just go back actually to talking about people who came before, in the more modern times. We had Sifu Bo, of course. Now, I just thought I'd mention something about Sifu Bo. He talked briefly about it himself, but in 1975, Bo and I were invited to do a demonstration in Queenstown. And that was for what was called the Wakatipu Associated Sports Club. Now, that was similar to what we have today. They have sort of sportsmen's awards and sportsmen's dinners. And it was one of the first of those, I guess, at the time, the sort of modern version. And we were invited along there. We took up about 5 students, I think, from memory. And there was a karate club involved, a judo club, and ourselves. And the guests were some very famous Kiwi sportsmen. There was Precious McKenzie, who was a weightlifter from, I can't remember where he was from originally, Jamaica or somewhere like that. And he was a gold medal weightlifter, I think, the Commonwealth Games. He had 4 gold medals. There was Dick Taylor, who was a 10,000 meter runner in the Commonwealth Games, gold medal winner. And of course, I don't think they have the Commonwealth Games anymore, do they? There's a part of history that's
interesting point. I thought they knocked it on the head. I don't.
I believe they did.
Huh.
Then there was the other runner. There was Rod Dixon, who was an Olympic and Commonwealth Games middle distance runner, and that was quite an evening. We put on. I guess each club put on about a 5-minute demonstration, and Bo was the organizer. He was the Jackie Chan stuntman, you know, and we put on what I thought was a pretty good show. And the reason why I thought I'd mention this too is for another reason. The different perspectives that people have on what they're seeing. And this is from two of New Zealand's leading sportsmen at the time. I ran into both Dick Taylor and Rod Dixon immediately after the dinner as everyone was sort of leaving. And I can't remember which one I spoke to first, but he was standing on the steps outside the big hotel where the function had been held. And I said hello to him, and he said, "Oh," he said, that kung fu demonstration of yours," he said, that was really good. He said, "I really enjoyed that." And then I ran into the other one in the foyer, and he said to me, "Oh, you're that kung fu guy." He said, "That was bloody rubbish." Now, the judo was really good, he said. So what people see and what they pick up and perceive, you know, is different. Everyone is different. So when you get the thing I've learned about Facebook and YouTube and that, of course, is when you put something up, all sorts of people are going to have all sorts of different opinions and make all sorts of comments. The best thing you can ever do is just ignore them, because everyone has a different perspective, a different point of view, and that was quite an interesting one that I was faced with. You know, what was that, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or something? You know?
Yeah, it's a bit like an inoculation, isn't it? I had a troll for a while when I first started this channel, and like most people, I was deeply offended, and you know, how can I deal with this guy and all sorts of stuff. But eventually I just started making jokes with him, and I sort of talked him around in a way, and he never came back. But it sort of hardens you up a bit, and you think, well, that's just the way it's going to be. People will have a go, and if they're too bad, I just go, bye-bye. There's the door, see ya. I just block them or get rid of them, and it doesn't matter, because I remember being horrified when I first got onto YouTube, reading the comments. I think, what the hell? Why are people saying all these terrible things? Like, I'm just scrolling through, just in public, they're just making monkeys out of themselves, really, but saying the most idiotic, vile things about people. And then after a time, I got used to it. I thought, that's just the way it is now. People nakedly show their disgusting bloody minds and personalities for everyone. Here, look, this is me. I'm a real turd. And I think if you're a turd, you should hide it. You know, it's a wiser way just to keep your turdiness to yourself, because it's ugly. That's why, you know, people who don't understand, why be polite, why have respect. Well, why do you reckon? You know, because if you get rid of that, everyone just becomes a mongrel, and it becomes a very unpleasant place to live. The world is, you've got to just control yourself.
No, that's so true, David. Bo, I wound up in Christchurch, and Bo wound up in Sydney, as you know, and we didn't see each other for a while, and I moved my family to Sydney, and late 19 or middle of 1979, I think it was, and lived there for a year. And I of course caught up with Bo, and at the time he hadn't been training with anyone. He'd been still training, but just on his own, and he hadn't sort of found a school to train out of that. And so I kept encouraging him. We spent a wee bit of time together in Sydney when we could, training, and I had a few private students in Sydney. I had some groups that were tied up with, I guess, the local government or whoever ran what they called the SIS programs in Sydney at the time, which I had a group in Fairfield, a group in Liverpool, a group in Cabramatta, and a group in Bankstown.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a few private students. So when I left, a couple of years later, I got a letter from Bo, and he was very excited. He had located a Wing Chun school, which was, as he said, it's run teaching the same principles that you taught me, you know, and that was Sifu Jim's academy in Sydney. So Bo, of course, immediately joined up. And
what year was that?
I think that was 1983. 82, 83, 80, 84. I think it was 83 actually, but that'd be recorded somewhere when Sifu Jim's academy opened up there. And I can't speak for Bo, but talking about people who come before, you know, there were people who had a great influence on Bo, just not myself, but Karen Armstrong, of course, and Nigel, I've just forgotten his name off the top of my head. Brereton,
yeah,
Graham Kirshner, and of course Sifu Jim, and that core, especially Bo and Karen, they're the ones who really built and established Sifu Jim's academy in Sydney. And so all those people who train in Sydney now, in fact, ones like yourself, you know, that joined up at Sifu Jim's, and you know, Bo and Karen were the ones that came before and established all of that, you know. And so I think it's important that people have a little bit of understanding of their history and their lineage, and
yeah, and have respect for their elders.
It doesn't take anything away from you that someone came before, you know, and just means that you've had a bit of an opportunity to get started a bit quicker on the path, you know.
Yeah, well, there was a period a couple of years ago where a lot of people online were saying, oh, what's lineage got to do with it? Who cares about your lineage? Who cares who came before? And I used to get stuck into them before I realized that often it's just not worth speaking up, because you're sort of talking to people who don't really want to hear anything. But I think it's the most important thing with Wing Chun. If you purport to do Wing Chun, then you want to know that it's actually Wing Chun and not something cobbled together in 1978 or, you know, 1983 or 2001. You want to know who they learnt from, and you want to be able to look back. And one of the thrills of my life was when they started releasing those sort of, you know, not official, but people had filmed the TV at the Yip Man Tong there in Foshan, and of Master Yip Man doing the forms. I was so thrilled to see him do Sunim Dao and Chum Kyu exactly the way I was taught, And then I saw him do the dummy, and there was just a couple of moves that were different to the way Chu Shong Tin showed us the dummy, or showed my teachers the dummy, but it was the same thing, and it was a thrill to feel that continuity with Master Yip and think, well, anybody who's not doing it that way is probably conning, because they've just made it up. He's doing it there at the end of his life. He's dying, he's got cancer. His sons are filming him for posterity. He's not going to just do the half-baked version or whatever. He's going to show the thing. This is what it actually is. This is what I was taught by my teachers. And as you know, there's been a lot of claims popping up about lineages that no one's ever heard of. They've all sort of popped up suddenly in mainland China or Taiwan or something. Oh, these are the real Wing Chun guys. It's like, maybe, but without a time machine, we can't tell. Everyone's dead who actually knows this stuff. And anybody, a lot of the older Chinese, I think, don't want to talk about it because it's not pleasant. There's no point in digging up old skeletons. But I'm very, very happy to be in the lineage I am. As long as I'm doing what Yip Man did, I'm pleased. That's
yeah.
I love that picture you got on the wall. I think the bald-headed guys are usually the best guys. That's my observation.
I had that picture hanging in my school since 1977. I put that picture.
Is that right? Yeah. Wow, that's legendary.
So I put it up pretty much wherever I am. It generally hangs in my garage, which is where I spend most of my training time. That's where my dummy is, and that's where I do my private tuition. I could do it in the office here, but I'd be tripping over books and things.
That's actually really legendary that it's from 78. That's cool. And I could almost be his love child if you think about it. That might be why. I could almost be his love child if you look at his bald head and shape of his face. But I don't. My mum wasn't like that, so it's probably unlikely. I'm going to fantasize, but so
going back to Sifu Bo, just because I think this is important as part of the history, and a lot of people, as I say, we need to know who our seniors were, and I'd like to see people write a little more about their teachers and who came before them. Now, I received a letter from Sifu Jim in 1990, because Sifu Jim, I consider him a friend. I never trained with Sifu Jim, but I met him on several occasions, and I had no reason to go and train with him. I had my own teacher, and I had my own way. But of course, I'd encouraged Bo to, when he said he was going to join up at Sifu Jim's, I really encouraged him, because that's what you need. You need a teacher who's on the spot, not on the other side of the ocean, And I got a letter from Sifu Jim, and I thought this was wonderful. He said, "I must congratulate you on bringing up students like Bo. He is a rare find among all the martial arts students. He is loyal, respectful, dedicated, and trains very hard. He is a real credit to the attitude of your teaching." So I was really chuffed at getting that letter, because it meant a lot to me. At the time, prior to that, when I came back to New Zealand in early 1980, mid 1980, I think it was, we'd only been in Sydney a year at that stage, and we'd moved back here, and I bought a business, wound up owning a business and doing things all the way you're meant to do them, and I had just a couple of private students. I wasn't teaching at all. any sort of public capacity. And I got a letter from Sifu Jim, in which he encouraged me to keep teaching. And so I was sort of encouraged by that. And then Bo came to see me, and I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 1985, 85 or 86. He came and did a workshop for us here in Christchurch. I got a few of the people I was training. A few people were keen for me to start teaching publicly again. So I got a wee group together and a wee place to train. And Bo came and did a workshop for us, and that really kicked me off again. So I owe a lot to Bo and of course to Sifu Jim for the encouragement that I got to keep teaching publicly again, you know. And I've still got students with me today that started with me then in 1985, you know.
Wow.
So
so who are your sort of long-term students?
Who are they?
Yeah. Because we don't know much of what I love about interviewing you and Bo is learning more about New Zealand. You know, a lot of my regular viewers who write to me are the Kiwis, and I really appreciate them. They're great guys, and yeah, it's nice to be able to get this connection with.
I'll name a couple who've been with me for a long time. There's Awatia Edwin. I can't remember what year Awatia started with me, but around about not long after that. And Awatia is a Maori boy from down in Temuka. Currently lives in Wellington, and he teaches Maori martial arts as well. He's very, very good. A historian.
I think I know him.
He trains with Sifu Mo now.
Did he get the traditional?
He did.
The traditional tattooing? Yeah, he's a great guy.
He is an exceptional student, and unfortunately, because we lived so far apart, and then ultimately he was in the North Island, and I was down here. I made a trip to Wellington and took him to meet Mr. Mo, and he's been with Mr. Mo ever since. And
yeah, he's in good hands there.
He's very, very knowledgeable, very skillful. He's been to Hong Kong a few times and been to well more than once anyway, I believe, and he's been to all around the world actually, and visited a number of kung fu schools. Raphael Stowers, who's still with me today. Raphael's started with me a little bit later. He's a Samoan boy, and very big boy. You've seen him in some of my videos probably, and big boy, very powerful, and just so enamored with the art, you know, and very good teacher.
Was he the guy that you're chi-sawing with, where you're standing on that ledge?
Yes, where I'm standing on the stage.
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
He's very, very nice gentleman, and that's one of the things I've been so blessed in Wing Chun, is meeting some wonderful people who are far better people than I am. You know, they're some great people, David, honestly, you know, and I've got a couple of younger lads who've been training for a while, quite a few of them. I don't like to mention too many names, and because I'll forget someone. I don't like to compare students, but I have a number of students that became doormen, as I've trained a lot of doormen, and I've trained a few prison officers. I draw the line at one or two people that I train, but I train most people who ever turn up at my door. In fact, talking about turning up at my door in 1976, I had a visit from a friend of yours.
Really?
Of your acquaintance in 1976. That was Lawrence Lee.
I thought it might be Lawrence back then.
Sorry?
I thought you might be going to say Lawrence. I was thinking, who would we know from the 70s? Yes.
Yeah, Lawrence Lee came to visit me in 1976, and that's quite a story which I'll elaborate on a little bit in my book. But basically, Lawrence came out here to start a chain of kung fu schools throughout New Zealand, and at the time he was very popular in Australia, of course, and he had a number of schools right throughout Australia, up into, I think, into Southeast Asia somewhere, and Fiji, I think, and different places he was sort of opening up. And he tried to open up a chain of schools in New Zealand, but unfortunately it didn't work, although I do believe that he maintained a small group of students up in Auckland somewhere. But so that was rather interesting. And another, and I mentioned a few names like this because people don't know that there's quite a big history of these martial arts in New Zealand, and who's been here and who hasn't been here and whatever. In 1977, I believe it was, I had a visit from Mr. Tam. And Mr. Tam Hun fan of Tam's martial arts. Now, Tam was actually the right-hand man, I believe, at one stage of Lung Ting's in Hong Kong. And Tam broke away and started his own Wing Chun organization. And he had a group here in New Zealand, in Wellington. Now, Tam had family here in Christchurch. He had a couple of, they're probably still here, but unfortunately, Tam passed away about 10 years ago, but he's got a couple of brothers here in Christchurch, and his mother lived here in Christchurch. So he came down here to visit, and of course I had by that stage I had a public school in the middle of town, and which is another story connected to Lawrence Lee. But Mr. Tan appeared at my school, and I spent a very interesting evening with Mr. Tam and his brothers at their mother's place. About 2 hours of reel-to-reel film footage of a lot of the competitions and that they were running at the time in Hong Kong. So training, tournament style competitions, and some which Mr. Tam had been in, by the way, and training. So that was a very interesting evening. And he appears, he's one of the main people who appears in Lung Ting's book, the big red Bible.
Right. Yeah, I know those books. I remember them.
Yeah, the Wing Chun Kung Fu, I think they called it the Bible or something. And
sort of the only thing you
yes.
could get for years, wasn't it? The only thing I remember seeing about Wing Chun was Lung Ting's books.
Yes. Well, Tam featured in that very heavily in that book. And there's a photo in there showing his school, because when Tam was still with Lung Ting, when he came out and opened the school in Wellington. And his main man in Wellington was Peter Sue. Peter Yu, a very nice gentleman. Tam, by the way, was very nice. He couldn't speak a word of English. And I met Mr. Tam several times, not just on that first night, but over a period. And Peter Yu was running this, and now it's quite possible that Peter Yu's school was even running before I was actually teaching publicly, but no one really knew about their school in Wellington at the time. But I do know that Awatea, who I mentioned before, Awatea Edwin, knew Peter as well, and had actually done a little bit of training at Peter's school in Wellington.
So is Awatea in his 50s? He looks a young guy to me, but I guess he's just conditioned.
Yeah, I think Awatea was what, probably about 18 or 19 when he started training with me, and that would have been in probably the early 80s. 40. Yeah, you're getting a bit old there, Awatea.
Yeah, yes, he's almost as old as me.
Awatea's a real leader. Susanna Ho came to Christchurch a few years later and did a workshop for us and just off the cuff in our academy. So that was very nice of Susanna. I was sorry to hear when she had stopped teaching, because I think, well, certainly stopped teaching publicly. So I think she was a bit of a loss to the Wing Chun community in that sense.
Well, that's what, before we started recording, I mentioned your shirt. That's the original HCH Wing Chun shirt from Sydney from the late 90s, and I've still got that shirt myself. I'm wearing my Dai Wei Kwun that side today, but the I was mentioning to you that shirt was a bit of a status symbol after a year or two, because the shirts changed to a golden yellow, and you could tell the old boys who had the grey shirt. And you got that shirt, like you came. So
I think
Susanna's, could you tell us about Susanna's opening of a school with Sigung when you went out?
Yeah, I got the opportunity to go to the opening of Susanna's school in Sydney, the official opening, when Chu Shong Tin came out for the opening, did a workshop. Yeah, that was a very interesting time. What can I tell you about the workshop?
Is it on film?
You learn a lot.
Yeah, those videos that Susanna took of Sigung going through the forms were like the very first time I personally got to see all the forms. Like, it was just really hard. Sifu Jim School, I never saw even Chum Q. I was only there for a year. And Susanna's school, we didn't do it. And it wasn't until I came up to up here and started training with Richard and Ivan that they showed me, well, I think they must have showed me other forms. I remember one of the first times I met them, Richard and Ivan did the knives and the pole. And I thought, well, my Christmases had come at once, because it was always hard to get information like that. And Susanna put those videos out. We all had them on a CD, I think, or one of those video CD-ROMs that we bought off her, of Sigung doing the forms, and then they were released onto YouTube, and they were a great help for me just to learn the forms until Sigung's sixth form DVD came out, which I still think is one of the best things ever made. That's the DVD I'm talking about.
I do, yeah. I do know the series, but I haven't got it myself. But
they're very, like, there's just, you probably heard this, but recently a good English translation, English subtitles came out that somebody who knew what they were talking about did it. And
Right.
there's a heck of a lot in there. Like, it's actually quite amazing. Some of the things that Sigong's talking about, it just all goes click when I'd watched those DVDs for a couple of years just in Chinese, to the point I almost felt like I could speak Cantonese because I was so used to listening to Sigung. And just picking up, I'd hear him say Fong Song, I'd hear him say Sing, I'd hear him say, Bong Sao, Tan Sao, Fuk Sao, Jern, sort of turn, and Yi Sik, those different words.
No,
Well, look, we've got.
They all go over the top of my head. Another visitor we had here who established a school in New Zealand was Danny Wan. He's the author of that book there.
Oh, right.
Very well produced and put together book.
You like that book?
It's okay. You can see I haven't really. I've read it, but it's a good book. It's a nice book.
What's his lineage?
I forget.
What's his style?
I forget. What's your style? Yeah, my style.
We could go to an island.
Now, before we go any further talking about that, I made a little books. Books are very interesting. Now, these two books here.
Yep, I know them well.
You'll know those books well.
Yeah.
A lot of people might not know it, but actually, Sifu Jim owes the production of those books to Karen Armstrong. Without Karen, those books would probably not have got written. Certainly not in that fashion. But they're very good books. The first book, the book that really cemented Wing Chun for me, of course, was this one here. And the gentleman who wrote it, of course, you'll recognize the name, Rolf Klausnitzer.
I don't recognize it, actually.
Rolf Klausnitzer is still alive, and he trains up in Perth.
Really? So
Perth. He trains with Peter. I forget the other Wong Chung Lung branch. Trains with the Wong Chung Lung branch, up in Perth. And that book there, if you want to know anything about Wing Chun, do whatever you can to get hold of that book.
Well, that's a high recommendation.
It is
just called Wing Chun Kung Fu. Is it a hard to get book?
Rolf Klausnitzer, it's out of print, I believe. So you might have to beg, borrow, and steal someone.
I mean, it might be like a rare bookshop. I wonder how many were produced.
Probably not a lot, but I had an original copy. This is a second edition copy, but I had an original edition copy back before 1970 sometime. But
I wonder if Mr. Klausnitzer has any, if you can find him.
He has a book on Kindle, is it? Whatever they call it.
Yeah.
An e-book, which is more about his life and then his early introduction to Wing Chun.
Right. So that book's from the 60s, is it? Like
1960. I think this edition was 1969. I think.
Wow, that's really old for Wing Chun in the West.
Yeah, 1960. Oh no, sorry, the first edition was 1969.
Hmm. I think anything pre-1972 is interesting because, 1972 is when Bruce Lee hit the scene, and 1972 is when suddenly all the money went into Wing Chun. Everyone wanted Wing Chun, people started publishing, but anything before that, I'm interested in because it's early stuff. Like I love Bruce Lee's early writings. One of my very favorite books, don't have it to hand, it's called The Tao of Kung Fu, and it was put together by John Little. Linda Lee allowed him access to the notes that had been used for the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, but that had been sort of cherry picked by Linda and somebody else. But she let John Little go through the whole thing. And a lot of people aren't really aware of those books, but they're amazing. Like I've got them all the John Little collection of Bruce's writings. And this one, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, have you seen it? I mean, the Tao of Kung Fu. Have you seen that book?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, well, it's still available, but it's actually a book that Bruce intended to write in the 60s about, and it's really Wing Chun. Like what I love about it, it's before Jeet Kune Do. So he wrote all these notes when he was still, really considered himself a Wing Chun guy. And there's a lot of stories in there of him and Yip Man in dialogue talking about Chi Sao, what the point of Chi Sao is, what it's about. There's other stuff thrown in there, sort of, from other Kung Fu styles and stuff that I don't quite relate to, but there's quite a core of real, actual, Wing Chun wisdom. And from my understanding of Wing Chun now, it sounds like it's straight from the old master. And I think it's very lucid, it's put into good English because Bruce could write well. And so I value it because it's like Master Yip Man talking in Chinese to Bruce, somebody he liked, telling him deeper aspects of it, and then Bruce then put it into good English. That's sort of rare. And, even today, our Chinese seniors, not many of them are very, literate in English, or, they don't speak English much. So they're excellent in their Chinese, but this Bruce Lee Tao of Kung Fu, it's a book Bruce wanted to publish, so John Little published it to the best of his ability from the notes that Bruce intended to use. So I'll have to try and send you a copy. They're out there. I know you're a collector like I am, and Bo also has a great collection of old books, and it's important.
It is important. It's one of my favorite Wing Chun books.
Ah. Blueprint for a Powerful Body.
Actually written by a Kiwi.
Ah.
Now,
Kiwis.
I don't know if you can see this, but if I sort of thumb through there a little bit slowly, you might see that about every second page is bent over.
Oh, yeah. Looks like he's doing a bit of yoga.
Yeah, just about every page is bent over. Now, I was in a shop one day and I saw this book there and I pulled it out of the shelf and I opened it up to a page and I thought, that's Wing Chun. So I bent the page over. Well, I mightn't have bent the first one over, but I flipped into something else. I thought, that's Wing Chun. So I'm reading it in the bookshop and I started bending the pages over because ultimately I had to buy it.
Yeah.
Now, we don't have to get stuck into trying to search old ancient things for clues to Wing Chun. human physiology and anatomy, the way that we move, the way that we stand and the way that we move is available. As you were saying in your water video, you know, it's all around us. Wing Chun's all around us. And there's nothing secret about Wing Chun because we all have 2 arms and 2 legs. It doesn't matter whether you're Asian or whether you're an American Indian or whether you're a Scottish coal miner. We all move pretty much the same. You know, we've got 2 arms, 2 legs, and it's really about how do we express ourselves? How do we move with power? And most of this, I'd say without a doubt, everything that we study and learn in Wing Chun is already studied and learned in all types of athletics, all types of arts, and it's all around us. And so often you just need to pick up something like one of your favorite books, David, this one here.
Yeah. Archery in earnest.
You like archery?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's similar to that book I told you about. And my very favorite is Zen in the Art of Archery by Eugene Herrigel. You know, that one about Japanese archery.
I've got a copy of that on the bookshelf.
Thought you would.
I've got a copy of that on the bookshelf. And in this book here, there's more Wing Chun in this book here. And there's more Wing Chun in this book here than you'll find in 90% of the Wing Chun books that have been published.
Wow.
Now, that's not to detract from the other authors who've written Wing Chun books, because they all have their own slant and their take on the history and their own lineage and then various things that we can learn from them by reading their books. But as I say, so for me personally, some of the best Wing Chun wisdom I've found was not in a Wing Chun book at all.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really like that. That's thinking outside the square.
Well, that leads me to another point, because people say I know, right? So, and I know that a lot of people watch these sorts of videos because they want to glean some information on wonderful, all this new revelation about Wing Chun. One of the things that I've found, number one, I don't presume to teach other people's students. One of the things I've learned is that when people say I know, you don't need to converse with them any further because their cup is full.
Mm.
And so I've found myself personally that there's a saying that I think it was Confucius who said that where 2 men walk, there walks my teacher. And that if we take that attitude to learning and understanding and studying, then there's just so much to learn, and so many people of wisdom and this knowledge lies in all sorts of weird and wonderful places, you know. That's the way I look at
it is very wise. I love the concept of the beginner's mind, and every day I try to be a beginner, you know, or keep that mind open. Like, you know, what you just said, you just showed me 2 books that are not Wing Chun. And if my cup was full, I'd go, yeah, you know, bullshit, as if I'd say, oh, yeah, Kev, but I mean, it's not Wing Chun. That can't be the same. What's it got to do with it? And, you know, me, I often talk about art as an analogy to Wing Chun, and I'm sure there's people who think, oh, come on, Dave, you know, talk about fighting, because what's art? That's painting. What's that got to do with it? but it's sort of obvious to me that it has a lot to do with it, the mindset and the way and whatever. But I really appreciate you showing us and sharing those things, because I know that's one thing I've always admired about Bruce Lee. He, people, very Wing Chun people often don't like Bruce much because they consider that he, tried to change Wing Chun, that he thought it wasn't good enough and he added things together. But I've never really felt that about him. I always remember how he said, the way I fight on movies is not the way I fight in real life. And different things I read in books, that I gathered in the 70s and early 80s biographies and whatever about Bruce, there was a lot of stuff like that, which I haven't seen since, where he indicates that he's still a Wing Chun guy. But he really just read widely into Chinese philosophy, Western philosophy, psychology, all those, you'd know well, those people that Bruce liked to read, Krishnamurti and Western boxing and fencing, and lots of people had nothing to do with Wing Chun, but he read them because he found, as you're doing in those books, the same thing and the same body that we all got, and how does it work? And it's cool.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that, along those lines, one of the things that Chu Shong Tin said, he was asked if he would demonstrate his wooden dummy form. And he said, words to the effect, and I'm ad-libbing a bit here, of course, was that he would demonstrate the Wing Chun form as it was. He would not show his wooden dummy form. And he said, I won't show you my wooden dummy form, but I will show you the wooden dummy form that was taught to me by a Yip Man. And I thought that was rather interesting, because we're all individuals, and we all see and develop and take from something and make applicable something that suits us, our physiology, our mindset, and where we happen to be going with the art on the day. And so we might develop certain movements within something like the dummy form or the butterfly knife form or something like that, which and not the way you were exactly taught. So that shows that we're not all meant to be robots and just copies of our teacher. But the forms give us a blueprint to go back to and to teach to our students, so that the art itself is preserved in a continuity, otherwise it would go off in all different directions. So we have our own direction, and you have your own direction, but we try and teach the forms as they were taught to us, so that the art's sort of kept pure, as it were, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the way. That's the way I see it, and the way I try to teach it. Talking about the butterfly, where am I pointing? Talking about the butterfly knives, David, because I know you've got an interest in my ideas and thoughts on that sort of thing. One of the interesting things, of course, about the butterfly knives is that they were known as the butterfly knives, or the choppers, or whatever, however you like to call them, the small broadswords, the weapons of very closely associated to the triads, and very closely associated to settling scores. So if someone from a different organization got out of hand and you wanted to send a message, the message was sent with broadswords. So even in the not too long ago. Now, I've got an example here. In 21 years ago, 23 years ago now. So back in 2009, a gentleman by the name of Lee Tai Lung, who was a senior enforcer for the Sun Yi On, or the New Righteousness and Peace Commercial and Industrial Guild, for a long name, which was Hong Kong's leading triad group at the time.
Mm.
He was assassinated with choppers.
Fair dinkum.
In February 2004. Oh yeah. So now even prior to that, and possibly still today, who knows? The triads were very big in London. So a lot of the Asian restaurants were stood over or involved with different groups. And there were quite a few battles in restaurants with meat cleavers and things.
Wow.
In 2014, Kevin Lau was was a former newspaper editor in Hong Kong, and he's getting out of his car. Another car comes along, runs him over. Then followed up by a guy on a motorbike who leaps off a motorbike and slashes him up with a meat cleaver.
Mm.
Now, I think he died later on in hospital. But so these sorts of things are still carried on today, you may as well say, because that was only, 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So 8 or 9 years ago. And despite the fact that they would carry out most of their crimes with, submachine guns or whatever, pistols, guns, knives, because anyone can adopt the modern weaponry. But when you wanted to send a message, you did it with a chopper.
Oh.
And so knives fascinated me. My favorite weapon is the butterfly knives. Although, funnily enough, I must admit that I haven't chopped anyone up with.
No, thank God for that.
However, I have talking about fighting and combat, I have been involved in fighting using sticks, and I mean real fighting, not training. And but not big sticks, not Filipino sticks, and not poles, but with short sticks, funnily enough, about the size of a butterfly knife. And so and I know someone out there is waiting for bated breath for stories, so I'll give you one interesting story. You've all seen the movie Ip Man, where who's the actor? Anyway, Ip Man's got the feather duster.
Donnie Yen.
Donnie Yen, and he's been challenged by the northern boxer, who finally whips out a broadsword, or has one handed to him, and he whips out this broadsword, and Ip Man pulls out a feather duster, and fights them off and beats them with a feather duster. Now, I'm pretty sure that they stole that idea from me. But not really. But however, back in the early 70s, early to mid 70s, when I was working in a hotel down south, I had adopted the habit on a Friday evening of when I turned up for work, I'd turn up early with a newspaper, and I would go through the sports pages and whatever else wanted. And by then people were starting to arrive, and I'd roll the newspaper up into like a stick, and then I'd unroll it, and I'd be just idly playing with it as I watched people come in, and I'd roll it up as tight as I could. And so I'd wind up with a piece of newspaper about so long, wound up into a very tight stick. And it's amazing, I used that newspaper stick on a number of occasions to take advantage of people. So, you know, a wrap across the eyes or across the side of the neck, or just slap them on the face with it. It does an awful lot to distract somebody while you take whatever other course of action you need to take. So I don't know if I've told you that story before, but that's one little trick I used to use. And if you haven't been poked with the end of a newspaper stick, then just imagine you've been just stabbed with a broomstick, because it's exactly the same thing. It's just rolled up wood.
Great story. Well, I'm a fan of Sherlock Holmes, and you know, there's that famous story about him talking about the fighting art that he used, and there was the rolled up copy of the Times newspaper was a thing. And there was a period, I don't know how long ago it was, but we used to get our newspapers wrapped up in cellophane, and I always like to have some kind of weapon in the car just in case that berserk road rage dude I have to deal with. And I used to always have one of these newspapers because I could tell the police it's just a newspaper. But like you say, you know, I prefer stabbing rather than striking. It's much harder to see coming, and it hits, like you said, like a broomstick. And I totally get what you're talking about with the newspaper, because they're really like a block of wood once you wrap them up tight. Yeah.
Yes. As far as training goes, as I said, I don't presume to teach other people's students, and I don't. If anyone who watches my videos or comments that I generally, if I do make any, my postings on Facebook or something, for example, will see, if they're observant, they'll see that I generally don't try to teach. I'll just present it as an idea. Okay, because I let people make up their own minds and see if they find anything that's beneficial or not to them. However, what I teach is what I call the art of invincibility, which is creating this sphere. And I don't know whether I mentioned that last time, but this sphere is a sphere which takes in the whole body, because we can't just be concerned with what's here in front of us, for example. And so the one piece of advice I would give is, I notice that one of the things that really I notice too much of is lack of footwork. Most people have got no footwork. They don't seem to understand footwork and the part that it plays. And one of the faults I do see it, and I mention it as a fault, and people can take it or leave it, whichever way they see. But I see people working on the dummy, and any movement which involves stepping into the dummy, they don't actually step in. And I think they just move a foot forward, but their body stays where it is. You know, they've got that unweighted front leg, you know. And I mean, people who've been training for years, I've seen some very prominent people making that sort of what I call a combative error. And I just wish that people would learn to and learn about being double weighted, which is appears to be a foreign concept to many. Being having an empty step is one of those things which is common to, say, Tai Chi, for example, whereas the weight is always shifting from one foot to the other, and there's always the only two places you get an empty step really in most Tai Chi, I think, is probably at the opening and the closing. Maybe halfway through they do. There is a move I can think of, but basically it's this sort of empty step thing, and people should pay a little bit more attention to double weighted.
What do you mean by double weighted?
Weight even on both feet.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that we can't move, that we can't step, or we shouldn't walk or run or whatever. They just seem to lack a basic understanding of double weighted. In a practical sense, to explain it and why I think that way, I've had numerous students from overseas who've come who use a double weighted type step, like when they pivot, for example, they pivot all their weight to what you would call their rear leg, and they're continuously losing their balance, falling over and applying no pressure to a training partner. And unfortunately, a lot of them have that what I was talking about before, which is I know it, and their cup's full when you show them why it's not working, and you show them how they can actually maintain their balance, and the next couple of minutes later they're back to doing it their own way. And I remember one student who'd had a number of years training in Chisea, and when I explained to him that don't do it like this, it's not working, try it like this, he went back to his old way after a couple of minutes. And when I asked him why, he said, well, it works when I'm over, I won't mention where or names, but he said, it works back there, you know.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's not working here. So just try and learn something new sometimes.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that having an empty step doesn't have its benefits or its uses, but there's a lot more than meets the eye, you know. And unfortunately, those types of things are almost impossible to teach over the internet.
Yes.
They need to be taught in person, because in person, people can feel what you mean and ask questions about what you mean and learn from experience. You know.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why I can't suggest the idea and people can go away with it and try it.
Yeah. Great stuff. Well, look, we better wind it up. I do have to go and get my big son. Don't want him walking in the heat. But it's been a terrific conversation as the previous ones, and hopefully we can have more conversations in the future. I want to meet you personally when I come to New Zealand. I don't know when that is, but it's been on my list for about 50 years. Go to New Zealand, but in recent times, people keep saying to me, "Come on, Dave, come over and visit us." And my lot of my family's over there now, and I want to go and see where the Hobbits and the Lord of the Rings movies were made, and there's a lot of things attractive to me about New Zealand, especially my Scottish fetish will be very satisfied over there. There's a lot of pipe bands and Highland games, and I think some of the best. One of my interests at the moment is learning to do the Highland Games athletic events. You know, I want to be good for my age, throwing weights and stones and tossing the caber and all that sort of stuff. So New Zealand's sort of like fair dinkum about it. We don't have much here in the way of Highland Games for the athletics. We've got a lot of pipe bands and dancing, but yeah, so we will get to meet face to face.
Well,
yeah,
I'll be looking forward to that, Dave. And you won't get many. What is it? Viking-speaking people over here, though.
There probably is a few. You'd be surprised. The Icelanders are little pockets of Icelanders all over the world, but
right.
Oh,
there's plenty of Scotsmen. There's plenty of Scots heritage down in Dunedin.
Yeah, I know you guys are very Scots. And I often look at all the place names are all so Scottish over there, and we got a lot of them here too. So it's a bit of a secret history as well. People have forgotten the Scottish history. But thanks, Kev.
I'm sorry. Look, I'm sorry I held you up today. I had a computer meltdown, and
oh, that's totally fine.
It's probably more a computer operator meltdown, but
oh, it's always a battle. It's always something.
Yeah,
something goes on, but we made it.
Yeah, we did.
All right, mate.
Thanks very much, David.
Thank you, and see you again soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you.